Well, here we are in Merthyr Tydfil. I'm Hugh Williams and we are about making a short tribute dedicated to the memory of one Harri Webb, a raconteur, librarian, Welsh nationalist, man of letters and an inhabitant for several of the formative years of his life here in Merthyr Tydfil and of course in Dowlais, where he was branch librarian. Behind me was the legendary Lamb Hotel, the Lamb it was always known, demolished as part of the improvement of the town centre in the early 1970s, but as a watering hole, Harri was seen to be drinking here on many occasions, albeit in a tiny, off-the-snug small bar which was only visible from the bar itself.
Hi, I'm Jeff Leishan, I'm Merthyr boy, and I knew Harri Webb well, more than well, but I put him as an acquaintance, as a friend, but I knew him right the way until the time I came across him in the old people's home just before he died. So Harri and I saw many exciting time, and he was quite a character.
Here was a Welsh nationalist, a Welsh Republican, a Welsh Free Wales Army enclave, where Welsh independence in resurgence after the Second World War, of which Harri was a part.
Well, I think there's not enough known about Harri Webb, either generally or around Merthyr, and although not originally a Merthyr man, I think Merthyr took him on board as a Merthyr man, and more specifically Dowlais, where he was a librarian and well known around the town, quite a character around the town. He lived not far from Caffi Zoa, up on Brecon Road, just the corner of Brecon Road, and I'm a bit young to really remember him fully, but I'd been in pubs that he was in on a number of occasions, and he was always quite a character. When I met him, I didn't realise about his poetry, or even that he was a poet. It was only in later years that I was given a book and some information on him, and become quite interested. The poems were at my level, if you like, not too highbrow, and mostly about Wales, which took my attention.
No, he's originally from Swansea, and then he was the librarian in Dowlais Library for 10 years, yes. 1954 to 1964, and then he died in Swansea, although he lived in Mountain Ash after Merthyr. So there's a Valley's connection there as well.
So do you know how long did he spend in Merthyr altogether?
10 years.
10, that's all?
Decade in Merthyr.
Quite an impression,
he did make a big impression, yeah. Obviously worked, as a librarian, but he was very active in the political scene here. Yeah. He was member of Plaid Cymru, stood once, not in Merthyr, but he stood, I can't remember where he was, but he stood for Plaid Cymru. So he was a socialist Republican, like myself.
Harri was a well-known character. We will see with other locations in this town and in Dowlais different facets of his life, his writings, his actions, his thoughts, his memories, and of course people who remember him as an important part of Merthyr Tydfil in the 1950s to the 1970s.
Colli Iaith
Right, so the project came about when I was talking to one of the trustees for the Biffa Trust, and we were talking about getting children more involved with local literature and their local history and developing their sense of community. So, of course, Harri Webb was the librarian here and a very well-known poet. So we decided to base a project around that. So Biffa provided the funding, and I approached Meic Jenkins, and then we approached the local schools and we got buy-in and the project went ahead. So we've worked with a class from each of the 3 local schools in Dowlas. The children have all done a workshop with Mike Jenkins. They've all written their poetry. There's been a competition running as well, and the Dolphin Fish and Chip Shop has very kindly given us some prizes. And this is basically it.
Basically I was here before Christmas as this is well, it's easy to say. I was here before Christmas, and it's a competition called the Harri Webb Poetry Competition. And there are a few winners from this school, including the overall winner. There were 3 schools involved, Ants, Litnitz and this school, and the overall winner is from this school, and also 2 highly commended people. Harri Webb was a well-known poet. He lived in Merthyr for 10 years. He was the, do you know the library in Dowlas, Henry? Yeah, he was the librarian in Dowlas for 10 years. Okay, so I came into the school and I did workshops in the library. Really, you had to write about poems, you had to write your own poems inspired by the poetry of Harri Webb. Okay, so we're going to hear those poems this afternoon. So
Bit of a Welsh activist, apparently.
Definitely, yes, yeah. And they congregated in a pub called the Lamb in Merthyr. They'd all gather there. Somebody else called Jeff Lation, who you would have interviewed.
Yes,
and of course, Jamie Bevan has written a song about the Lamb.
Yes.
So it was a pub where they all gathered and where Harri Webb used to write these poems, apparently, on beer mats when he was there.
Well, I first came across him when my cousin, Mike Stevens, who was director of the Welsh Arts Council, who was my cousin, he was living in the Garth Newydd in Merthyr, and that's when I first came across him, and I got to know him when he was drinking in the Lamb.
Mae'r llantiau yn rhoi clod yn y lam yn fflag, a dyn y bariau John the Lamb yn cysgu ar y job. Mynwch i ni beint, a gewch chi glywed mwy am sut fi boes y lam yn bwydro i Gymru tan yr hwyr. Y Brigadier a Harri Webb yn yfyd iechyd da, a dyn y bariau John the Lamb yn cysgu ar y job. Ar Pobl am fe roddwyd pennill lleon lli, a mlad a dir a Pobl a Cymru rydd. What Wales has always needed and always lacked the most is not an eastern border but an eastern coast. Y Brigadier a Harri Webb yn yfyd iechyd da, a dyn y bariau John the Lamb yn cysgu ar y job.
Over my left shoulder is a complex of buildings called Garth Newydd, which was not as it looks today, but a multiplicity of dwellings, mainly for young men in the 1950s into the early 1960s. John Dennythorne, a well-known Quaker activist, had rooms on the ground floor as rental, and above were a group of intellectuals, people like Mike Stevens, Cydrich Rhys, Phil Beer, and of course Harri Webb, where they were putting into being intellectually the makings of a Welsh Republican movement. Here, for example, Harri Webb designed what would become the White Eagle motif of the Free Wales Army. We've mentioned earlier that they met in the Lamb pub at the bottom of here at British Tip. This was the intellectual origins of these people seeking an alternative form of government after the Second World War. Once the nationalisation of a Labour government had worked its way through, this was independent Republican Wales to be put into print come the 1960s. One of the foremost scribes of this movement, of course, was our own Harri Webb.
Did he generally write in English or did he write in...
No, he was Anglo-Welsh. He wrote quite a number. His most famous Welsh one was Colli Iaith, Colli Hunan. Losing your language, lose yourself. the cornaidd cymdeithas, the crown of society. Yeah, he wrote a lot of very famous poetry in Welsh. In the Welsh cultural circles, he was one very well respected at the time. We had, as being an acquaintance, and he was a drinking. Whenever he came in, we had a pint together, but it was off and on. I'd go up, but in the Lamb were a couple of guys. One of them was they were Free Will's Army, which was a non-existent organisation, which doesn't represent anything. They were just troublemaking, and they were what is known as gomas, and they were just making a lot of noise. But Harry had one of them staying up in the Garth Newydd. We had the key to the Garth Newydd, and he fell out. And this guy, his name was Neil Jenkins, he was a teacher. He was a colonel in the Free Will's Army, because there wasn't a rank less than a major, so he was quite whatever. And he had to move, and he got on to me and said, will you come and move his bed from the Garth Newydd to some digs he'd found in Dowlais? And so I went up with a collier from Tower Colliery and a couple of guys to move the bed. And when we went in, unbeknown to us, there was a Breton wrestler who had come over from Brittany, who had long hair right the way down. And as we were moving the bed, the collier from Tower Colliery bumped into him. He was there to threaten us. And as he bumped into him, he turned around and said, sorry, love. Which, well, you got to be there, I suppose, to see the funny side of it. Yeah. But it was very difficult when we went to bed. We were all laughing, and we nearly fell down the stairs. But Harry was on the thing, get out the wheels, Jenkins. You'll never come back, etc., etc. It was just one of those little incidents, those little vignettes that happened in my life now and again, which I remember with much amusement.
Okay, so this project, Mike, we're doing, this video, is all around this project you're doing. What's the project called?
Well, really, it's like the Harri Webb poetry competition.
Yeah.
And it's run. It's been organised by Sian Anthony, who's a librarian in Dowlais, because of, obviously, Harri Webb's connection with Dowlais Library. And the idea has been to involve children, primary school children, from the 3 schools in Dowlais. I've done workshops with Dowlais Primary, St Illtyd's Primary, and Pant, and using Harri Webb's poetry to inspire them, and they've written poetry as a result of that. And there's a competition, and we've got 4 winners of the competition. Okay, so I'm going to announce the first winner, and he's going to come out and read his poem, and that's Jaden Giles. Well done, Jaden. Right on.
My name is Jaden from Dowlais Primary School, from Dosbarth Mynydd. This is my poem. Free as a bird by changes. Head to toe in cold, it's about to snow, freezing in the cold. Guests live in luxury while workers live in mould. We've had enough, this is for us. Red flag up high, anger in the mind. I'd rather 24 people die than live a lie any longer. So up high for our freedom like birds in the sky.
I know when he was writing his poems on his own bits of paper, he was quite a doodler, and if you can get the originals, he also wrote some excellent poems just standing by a bar, no doubt, perhaps walking down the street and stopping a cafe and jot them down. From what I've gathered, is that he could be quite stubborn, and in his latter years he would only write poetry in Welsh, not in English, which was showing a bit more of his nationalist side as well, which although I'm not a Welsh speaker myself, I'm quite proud that he did that as well, and perhaps I have to learn my own language to be able to read his Welsh poems, because I don't think any of them have been translated either.
What appeals to you especially about his poetry?
Well, it's Welsh valleys with very much an appeal to me as a Merthyr boy, and in doing so I've met loads of people, and in fact I went down to the Denmark-Wales football match, And somebody and I mentioned Harri Webb, and somebody was, wow, really liked it, you know, and was enthusiastic for it. A youngster of 20 years of age was obviously interested in Harri Webb's poetry, which surprised me, but that's what I'm saying, making the comeback.
Have you ever met Harri Webb, Mike?
I have, yeah. I met him a couple of times. I read with him at a Socialist Republican event, and I also read with him at a more public event in Chapter in Cardiff, where Vincent Kane, quite a well-known newsreader, was supposed to read, and I replaced him. I was a last-minute replacement. So it was myself and Harri Webb reading. It was great to read alongside him. So we're kicking off with, starting off with Jeff Leishan, who knew Harri very well. Okay, back in the days. And okay, over to Jeff. Thanks. Jeff.
Just before I read it, just to say that this record is not on sale anymore, so you can't bid for it. It's one of my proudest possessions. It's of the Lamb in Merthyr, and it's got Harri Webb on the front, and it's got a whole range of characters that would have been in that first television programme called The Green Desert. He did one on Poems and Pikes as well. In it is Heather Jones, she's still alive, Margaret John, who's dead, Ray Smith, who was a very famous actor at the time, whose voice was exactly like Richard Burton, and the Hennessy's, who this whole record was put his poetry, some of his poetry reading, some of it, and it's about Gwyneth. Gwyneth was a bard who fought for the Welsh language, culture. He was a terrific character, and this poem was dedicated to Gwyneth. When I heard he was dead, I remembered so many things. A little man speaking in the rain to a soaked crowd with bedraggled flags around the mediocre monumental masonry that is Pantycelyn's grave.
So really this tells us an awful lot about, well, the question is where did Harri Webb's father go? Well, I'll give you the poem now. Here we go. And it's called The Boomerang in the Parlour. Will Webb, a farmer's son from the cliffs of Gower, went as a young man to Australia, exchanging the cramped peninsula for the outback, the frugal patchwork of fields for the prodigal spaces he rode along the rabbit fence or under the soaring jarrah.
Beard, breakfast clipped, he'd flit in Gabardine through streets in dowless downpours. Top deck on bus, past whistling Atkins, we'd see him, ensconced now, perusing bookshelves, returned to his red cocoon.
There's a stirring in the hedgerows.
What will the pupils and adults gain from the workshops?
There's a gathering.
Well, I hope that they will be introduced to Harri Webb, whereas maybe they haven't been in the past. They'll gain an appreciation of his poetry, hopefully get into writing their own poetry and be involved that way as well. And come to the library. Please come to the library.
And her daughters are riding through the night.
When Mike said that we were reading Harri Webb tonight, I regretted having lost my copy of Songs for Welsh Freedom, which he and Mike Stevens wrote when they lived in Gwylod y Garth, and it was published by the Triskel Press. Anyway, as fortune would have it, Harry used to visit the Lamb Inn, which Jeff has already shown us a picture of. And it was roughly where the New War Memorial is, opposite the end of Cleveland Street. Harry would write at the bar. And Alan Evans, of Alan Evans Motors in where's it? Brecon Road, yeah. I promised him the advert. Has a Harri Webb poem on his wall there. And he's got the original as well, so this may well be unique. Sing a song of rugby, buttocks, booze and blood, 30 dirty ruffians brawling in the mud. When the match is over, they're at the bar in throngs. If you think the game is filthy, then you should hear the songs. And it's signed Harri Webb, Bardd yr Oen.
And the next winner, also highly commended, is Gwyncy Jones.Mae Harri.
My name is Gwyncy Jones.Mae Harri and I'm from Dangos Primary School and I'm in class dosbarth. This is my poem. Minnie James, The Temple of Peace by Gwyncy Jones.Mae Harri. Minnie and her 3 sons were involved in the World War I. She waved goodbye and cried tears of luck before the war began. The sons fought for their country with the luck their mama spade, while back in Dowlas was Minnie, worried and dismayed. One day there was a knock on the door where someone spread the news. Minnie found out that her 3 sons had died and her whole face turned blue. Minnie cried all day not knowing what to do, and in her grief she knew where she needed to come to. The Temple of Peace brought her hope and filled her heart with joy. It helped her remember her beloved and brave boys.
Thank you.
Here we are at Dowlas Library on Church Street. This was opened in January 1907, partly funded by the Carnegie Foundation. Harri Webb came here in 1954 as a branch librarian and stayed until 1964, living at, as we see earlier in the film, at Garthnewydd. One story of myself as a child coming to this library with my friend Alan Jones, Harri being a very imposing, frightful figure with a beard, piercing eyes. Silence was the order of the day in the library. Alan came up these steps, ran in and shouted to make a noise, then ran out, pursued by Harri Webb on these several steps. They both tripped over and tumbled down Church Street together in a mass. What a hilarious but frightful scene.
Have you seen the plaque in Dowlas Library?
No, I haven't.
You haven't?
No.
Well, there's a plaque in Dowlas Library about Harri Webb and for Harri Webb. Do you think he should be honoured with more than this?
Well, I went to the Marine Industrial Museum in Swansea. Yeah. It's worth a visit because nearly over half the exhibits are all from Merthyr. The Trevithick's engine down there. Huge references to the massive ironworks here, right? What it's doing in Swansea, I don't know, but there it is. And on one wall are all the famous people from Swansea, but not Harri Webb. So I've complained to them, and I said, where's Harri Webb? They didn't even know who he was. But to me, he's one of the most famous Welshmen there are. But there you go, it's subjective, isn't it? It's me, not anybody else. He was a guy that was pretty difficult to get on with for a lot of people. I mean, to be perfectly truthful, and I've spoken to a lot of people who he fell out with, old friends. Never fell out with me because he was an acquaintance.
Of course, there's a plaque to Harri Webb in the library, which is not so long ago. That was opened in tribute to him. I think there could be a lot more. I think there could be a lot more for all the writers who have come from Merthyr, like Leslie Norris, Glyn Jones, Jack Jones, and so on. But that's a start. There definitely should be more. What I'd like to see is kind of basically plinths or places where which are associated with those poets or writers, and I think there should be a plinth there with biography of the writer and with an extract from their work or a poem. I think that would be really good if that could.
And the overall winner from all 3 schools was from this school, and that's Macy Ray Jones.
My name is Macy Ray Jones and I am from Dowlas Primary School, from Darllen. And this is my poem, The Ghost of Dowlas by Macy Ray Jones. Slowly, quietly, I crept around. The trees are blowing, leaves on the ground. Everything's different, nothing's the same. Gone on the streets where I used to play. Children go to school, not to work. The yard is filled with fun and laughter. I wish I could be with them because my life was so much harder.
Yeah, thanks very much. That's it, really. Well done to all of them. Brilliant. Thank you.
Colli Iaith a cholli'r ddas, colli oedd, colli barddas, colli coronau'r cymdeithas, ac yn ei lle cael bratiaeth fas. Colli'r hyn a lawon persau, colli'r corau di asbedau, colli tanau'r dylun gwrau, ac yn ei lle cael gleb a grai. Colli crefydd, colli enaid, colli ffydd yr hyn wroniaid, colli popeth glan a thelaid, ac yn ei lle cael baw a llaid. Colli tir a colli teddydd, colli elan a thrywerin, colli clem